Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Well, folks, in so many jurisdictions the world over, the lockdowns are coming to an end and economies are reopening, but not so much in Canada. And when you are a politician of any political stripe, of any jurisdiction here in our great Dominion, it seems that when you argue for more economic liberty, you are dismissed as being unproductive or counterproductive, or even being called an outright crank. Why, oh why is that? Well, joining me now is our friend to the show, Andrew Lawton of True North. And Andrew, you had a great commentary on True North discussing this very issue. And we have seen that politicians, and I think of people like Randy Hillier, Roman Baber, those who speak out against the Ontario policy regarding the lockdowns, well, suddenly cancel culture comes right up into their windshield, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's actually quite shameful. I mean, we've seen in the last several years a number of issues become political hot potatoes, where if you have the wrong opinion of them, it's a cancelable offense. And we've talked about this, you and and I know on our respective platforms we have. But we're talking about something really devastating right now, which is that you cannot even speak out in support of reopening, in support of sending people back to work, of letting people live their lives, without that being characterized as a fringe position and you being then characterized as fringe as well. And as far as all of the, I say political issues, because that's really what it is, as far as all of the political perspectives that have become cancelable, this is one that I find is the most shameful because of the fact that it's actually a majority position. Most people want to live their lives and go back to it. But in politics, it's a slim minority of politicians prepared to say that.
Indeed. And, you know, Andrew, I want to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Anthony Fury. He had a great column in today's Toronto Sun. It was about a briefing that happened on Monday by the Ontario Science Table. And to me, it was incredible good news, because you look at the stats, and there's so many stats, but I think the most important one was that this science table concluded that a whopping 55% of deaths coming from the virus were from long-term care residents, and the number of deaths, and when you look at that as a segment of the population, that's only 0.5%. So we know now, surely, where the most vulnerable demographic is, and it only accounts for 0.5%. So why the heck is the economy in still lockdown mode? There's so many arguments to be made that the so-called cure is worse than the curse.
One of the big things that I've noticed in all of this is that whenever we've had predictions from, I'll say Ontario specifically, my and your province, they have been flat out wrong. And I don't just mean, they might just have a bit of a rounding error, but flat out wrong, oftentimes a literal fraction of what was predicted. Remember, the first modeling we heard said that we would have 100,000 deaths. We were supposed, and that was within the span of a few months from when that was made in I think it was April of 2020. We've been told that we could be up to 20,000 cases a day by now, and we're actually at we're at about 1,000. And this whole thing happens in a way that most sensible people would say what Anthony's been saying, what you've been saying, what I've been saying, which is, okay, if those numbers are wrong, let's delve into them a bit deeper and ask, where are the risks and what can we do safely and who do we need to really protect and target our measures towards? And for the government that says science needs to be at the forefront of its decisions, this is the process they should be doing. But they're not. It's coming from independent media. It's coming from so-called fringe politicians, and that's how it's so maligned.
And, Andrew, what's behind this? Because my take on this, my friend, is that before this pandemic took root, I didn't know who the various chief medical officers were in the city, in the province, federally. I didn't know the name of Eileen Davila and David Williams and Teresa Tam. And now these are almost household names. They're almost like celebrities. And yet these are unelected, non-accountable people that are completely immune to any kind of financial hurt from a lockdown. They haven't suffered a nickel's worth of salary being deducted. They haven't been laid off. And it seems that our elected leaders are beholden to these people and almost using their advice as an excuse of why the economies must remain in lockdown.
Well, just look, David. Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, got an Emmy out of his press briefings. In BC, the chief medical officer of health, Dr. Bonnie Henry, got a book deal out of it. So she's a medical officer who's actually got time to write a book throughout this pandemic. And listen, what we're seeing here is, I think, twofold. Number one, I believe there are genuine risks. There are public safety risks that are inherent in the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think that what government doesn't want people doing is taking it upon themselves to start deciding, well, I think this is safe, I think this isn't. So they end up with this one-size-fits-all position. But the problem with that is that it delegitimizes all of their advice when they're proven to be wrong on their numbers. So people don't actually pay attention. People don't listen to them. When the government was saying, well, don't do masks, they make things worse, and then do masks, and now double mask and triple mask, and by this time next year, we might be at the hazmat suit phase of it. Who knows? When they do these flip-flops, all they do is force sensible people who aren't themselves experts to just say, well, all right, I'm just too confused by it. And that, I think, is a big risk here. So government is trying to use simple, easily understood solutions, but to do that, they have to go to the lowest common denominator, which means the least possible freedom.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.